Good morning. Welcome everyone to the last day of our sessions. But as Irene and I have been telling people, as you come in, you can still email us. There's lots of support from ARPDC.
Yeah.
Our colleagues are available as well. So we'll help you as much as we can during the session, but remember that all of our ARPDC colleagues are available to help you throughout the year.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'll hand it over to you, Irene.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to sharing information and ideas and thoughts with you today, as always. And I'd like to, of course, start by expressing our land acknowledgement. Today, we acknowledge the lands we share with the Indigenous people, including the Métis, the Inuit, and all other ancestors who have made these lands their home. As we gather within these territories, we're thankful for all that sustain us and provide for us at this time of year. We're thankful for new beginnings, new life, and new opportunity provided. In the essence of reconciliation, we acknowledge these territorial lands of Treaties 6, 7, and 8. And I would just like to add a little tiny piece. My parents were World War II survivors from Ukraine. And of course, when they came to Canada, I was born in England, and we came to Canada, eventually ended up in Edmonton. And, you know, life went on and everything. And it's only been about, I don't know, 4 years or so where I've watched things on television and the news, and I've thought, you know, that scarf looks exactly like a Ukrainian scarf, those kokum scarves. And I thought, there's no way. Like, I have several that I bought when I was in Ukraine. And I kind of looked up the history of that and realized that it was a trade situation between Ukrainian farmers, especially out in East Central Alberta, and Indigenous people. And whenever I see that, I think, oh, that's a Ukraine connection for me big time. And plus, my family lives there right now in Western Ukraine. So they're, of course, they've got their huge issues to deal with. But I thought, that's a connection. That is a complete connection for me. And I didn't know anything about it until a few years ago. So it's a neat little piece. I really enjoy that. Okay. Today, I'll give you a minute to think about this. Choose 3 to 5 words that describe your first day of teaching. Go way back, or, you know, whenever. And the word that came up for me all the time was ignorant, but I suppose that's looking back with more knowledge. But go ahead and share in the chat or unmute. Describe your first day of teaching. Scary, exciting, daunting, yes. Nervous, excited, flustered. Chaotic lockdowns, oh, lovely. Overwhelming, exciting, natural, that's good. Yes, fear and doubt for sure. Open-ended. Anxious, odd. Yeah, sweaty palms big time. Oh, pulling a fire alarm on the first day, lovely. Too long ago to remember. Such good descriptors. I think all of the words together would describe our first day. And I teach at Concordia University after degree students, and I look at them and I have to keep in mind this is their first, and not just say, oh, well, but don't worry about it, because I think it's a natural process. So thank you for your contributions to that. That's wonderful. Okay, so we're going to move to, I'm focusing on nonfiction today. I'm going to use a nonfiction book that could be used, or any nonfiction book could be used in terms of that. So I looked at grade 4, but as I looked through 5 and 6, you know, there's nothing in the new program of studies that doesn't refer to nonfiction text. And so my thinking is that certainly when I taught nonfiction in school, I did a research report in October, and that was the end of that. And then we did narrative. And that was, you know, it's such a poor example of my illustrious career, but you know, we did that, but it wasn't given that same level of importance. And this was before the last year's curriculum sort of thing. And as we continue on in this world, we really, really need to think about adding and infusing far more nonfiction in the work that we do. I'm just speaking in general terms and thinking about myself and realizing that this is another very huge, important genre that we need to incorporate. Nonfiction is based on fact, and that gives us an opportunity to help students distinguish between fact and opinion in a really big way. So that's one reason why nonfiction. It's the biggest category, by the way, of reading, writing, and viewing. In nonfiction, when you have text features are full of pictures and graphs and all sorts of, you know, photographs and diagrams, labels, that kind of thing. And we see a lot of that. And just some examples would include anything like biography, cooking, business, health, crafts, pets, language, travel, so much more, you know, self-help, science, and so on. And I believe that our students read more nonfiction or are exposed to more nonfiction than they ever have been. Even in that COVID component, you know, the minute they go outside, they're reading signs, they're reading menus and things like that. So it's part of our mandate to teach our students how to inform, explain, describe, instruct, how to critically think about nonfiction, how to do reader response with nonfiction, and how to consider writing nonfiction as students themselves, because it's a whole other kind of writing. It's a kind of writing that I would suggest a lot of students struggle with, more so than narrative. And you know, we can see that sometimes. There was a grade 9 PAT, and I was speaking to a teacher about it, and she wanted to see what students would pick, and they picked narrative over the essay component most of the time. And I would think that's part of, I don't know, I'm not familiar with it, I'm not that great. And so we must approach nonfiction as healthily as we approach narrative fiction. Just that you can read it in any order and that it has text features is an incredible component that differs completely from the other kinds of genres that we study. So we can move on. And again, please pipe in and ask questions, share your thoughts at any time you wish. The critical study of nonfiction texts recognizes the need to instruct students in skill sets. We're talking about specialized vocabulary, visual depictions of information. This is the nonfiction component, and this is why it's important to do a critical study of such things. Now, I'm not suggesting we do gigantic units that take up half the year or whatever, but we certainly need to infuse more of that kind of look at text than perhaps we have. It's my hope that I can give you some strategies today to start to look at that in your own work. So this is an important component, specialized vocabulary, and Tricia really spoke a lot about vocabulary yesterday. And now this moves us into that disciplinary area of vocabulary. And it's very important that we demand our students use the language of the discipline when they write, draw, or tell. So you can't say stuff in math because that's not actually a math word, nor is stuff anywhere unless you're writing a story. But you know, we want to demand the use of the language of the discipline. that's going to help with that whole academic thinking that we do in school. There's a chat. Do you have suggestions of where to find nonfiction resources? I don't shill for Scholastic. Not getting a condo if I say their name, but they have a dearth of nonfiction text. This is from Scholastic Conservation. Just a wealth of nonfiction, smaller pieces to go through to critically assess. I would really go to the Scholastic website, Scholastic Canada, and really look through there. They've just got so much good choice.
Irene,
All
if I
right,
can
yes.
chime in, I just went to my local used bookstore and I found so many pieces of nonfiction. The National Geographic, like they have Weird But True, all these gross things. I got some Mythbusters books. Oh yeah, Newsella. That's a good website to use as well. But there's all kinds of resources at any used bookstore as well. You just have to spend the time looking through, but I'll show you later also how to find some resources on the curriculum website.
The other thing that Newsella is very good, or Newsela, I don't know which way you say it, but it's a very good place to read nonfiction news articles in different categories, science, weather, those kinds of things. It shows you the same article, but at different, high, middle, low sort of reading levels. I typed in to the chat room, New York Times. And what you do is you just Google New York Times, what's going on in this picture. And it's brilliant, and it's free to register. It's a brilliant place to go for looking at nonfiction, doing visual analysis of nonfiction. So what you'll get on a Monday is a picture with no titles or anything else, and students will try to figure out what's going on in this picture. What is it? What do you think? And then on Thursday, you get the reveal of this is what this is a picture of. Now, if you register, then you can go into their past records and do things where you can discuss New York Times on Monday with the reveal, etc. I put it in the chat. Just go to New York Times and specifically what's going on in this picture, and it'll come up. And it's just such a nice way for students to be involved with visual text, with talking to each other, and then finding out, if their predictions matched what the picture is about. It's a very good routine component where you could do it once a week. It's a very good look at that visual component. So New York Times, what's going on in this picture, I highly recommend it. Okay, so just the next slide is about what I had said earlier, that critical exposure to informational text delineates a writing style with which many students struggle. And I think that that's true. I know it was with my students. It was, mind you, the way the delivery happened wasn't so great. We're going to do a research report on the research of animals that we've already researched, that's been researched. So we're just going to regurgitate the research, is how I viewed what I did. And not a good way to go. We need to use all the reading strategies that we know about in nonfiction work. When we look at the before part of the reading process, the during part, and the after part, we apply everything we know to nonfiction texts, not to mention viewing. If we're going to do a film study, if we're going to watch a vignette of something, we still need to look at before, during, and after reading skills so that we can guide our students through understanding that text and making meaning from it. Where to get resources for nonfiction, and the responses was for that. And I had mentioned Scholastic, and then Tricia had mentioned other resources for me. All right. So on the next slide, we are looking at ideas, pieces from the new curriculum. And I looked at grade 4. The two organizing ideas, as we've learned this week, we can do reading and writing, which are two sides of the same coin. And in our work, we've got to teach both together simultaneously, as opposed to a reading unit and then a writing unit. If I'm going to teach my students how to write persuasion, I'm going to share texts with them that are good examples of good persuasion. So we read and write, and I've always sort of, Monday we're going to read and pick apart, look at the structure. Tuesday we will begin our introductory paragraph. Wednesday we're going to read some more. But we've really got to look at that component in a whole different way. Comprehension is the other piece. If I know how nonfiction works, then I know where to go. We don't have to read things in order. We don't have to read the whole thing. How do I look for specific information in that text? And so as we take our students through these, they can apply these two organizing ideas to whether they write or whether they read nonfiction. All right. Then I went to the learner outcomes. And just to let you know, that small bullet refused to cooperate with me. And so I gave up. I tried, but it didn't work. And, I apologize for that. Anyway, in the learner outcomes for grade 4, we see that students examine how the form and structure of text can support the communication of ideas and information. And then students investigate strategies and connections that support text comprehension. And those are the pieces that we assess through knowledge, skills, and procedures and understandings. So that's where we go to get at these big ideas that say, my student can do this, and this is how I assessed to let you know that this is how he or she has done on this. So after the learner outcomes, I went to knowledge and found a wealth of information around nonfiction. And this is grade 4. And that's not to suggest grade 5 and 6 are completely different, but there will be a word or two that will change or be omitted. And that's just that raising the level of accountability. Genre teaching. So students need to know what a genre is. What are genres? What's the difference between them? Specific focused genre teaching, which could easily fall into a routine or a mini lesson, or once a week, we're going to look at genres and be able to identify what makes them so. Literary forms of fiction and nonfiction include novels, journal entries, media. Media text can be digital or non-digital, and there's that visual component that we look at that says this is perfect for, this is part of nonfiction, and all, in a bigger world, this is what we're bombarded with all the time. Text features can include images and graphics and indexes, all sorts of, there's glossaries, that kind of thing. And nonfiction texts include autobiographies, procedural texts, land, those kinds of compare and contrast. And I'm hoping that there's a question, any ideas for how to teach a 4-3 split? I'm really hoping to give you some pieces today that will help you to do that. The strategies I'm going to share with you are 4, 5, 6, easily looked at and said, oh, okay, I'm going to take that and use it with my split group or use it with my grade 6s. All right. The knowledge continues. Procedural texts. Next slide, please. Procedural texts are things like recipes, instruction manuals. So if I'm going to ask you to create a recipe for love because it's Valentine's Day coming up, I need to show you recipes, and I need to show you how to read them, how they're structured, how they look, and then I'll ask you to try a recipe of your own. The same thing with instruction manuals. Yes, they can be so complex that, and that's where Irene comes in as a struggling reader, especially with IKEA, anything visual. But yes, this could tie into computational thinking and science, absolutely. But there's, not to be rude, but there's the whole thing about the For Dummies books. And I recall a high school teacher having kids do help me science people meiosis and mitosis and explaining it in a For Dummies kind of book. Actually, the audience was elementary school kids, so they had to do short sentences and visuals to explain that concept. So those are the kinds of things that we can look at. I had a high school teacher do a Macbeth for Dummies, and the kids worked in small groups to create an understanding of text from their point of view. So, don't sell yourself short. These are pieces that we can incorporate that say we write nonfiction as well. And text structures in nonfiction have an introduction, a main idea, supporting details, a conclusion, there's compare, contrast. And nonfiction can share opinions. Someone who's writing about this, can we not say, well, who wrote this and what's his background? And what message is he trying to give us? So, I have only one son, so everybody in the world is he, but that's what I'm saying. So if we look at the chat, we've got fractions as well. This is another idea to do, is to have point of view, right? The experience of a fraction, writing to a decimal, explaining why they're better or something like that. But students have to know the context of what they're writing about to get that done. There's a good RAFTS model, role, audience, format, topic, purpose. And, it's a really great way to assess. And it's a really great way to have kids go into the context of the work they do. So you could be a parent writing a letter to a government person about forestry, etc., like that. If you're interested, just email me. I've got pieces around rafts. I did not include that today, but if you'd like that, I can certainly send it to you. And so Trish is going to, I think right now, yeah.
I think this is the time that we thought we would take a pause, and I will show you how to find some of these things in the curriculum. So I stopped sharing, but I can go back to sharing. Oh. And suddenly I'm having trouble sharing, sorry. There we go. All right, so back showing you where to find these things in the curriculum. I didn't log in, I'm sorry. Oh, there we go. Oh, I might have to do it without logging in. It's slow. Okay, so the last day I showed you how to do a search. I want to remind you to use that search. I'm going to put in nonfiction, and then we can have a look at where this comes up in the curriculum. And it's also going to help you if you have a combined grade. So here's where we find it in grade 4, grade 3. Let's start with grade 3 because we did have a question about that. So in grade 3, we see that this comes up under text forms and structure. It specifically mentions nonfiction. And again, if we look across, we can see that in grade 3, they specifically want you to talk about biographies, content area text, so that's your cross-curricular, and interactions with people. So recognizing that people are a source of information, and reading the land as text. So going out on the land and looking at it and seeing what can be revealed from paying attention. Then in grade 4, they specifically want you to talk about autobiographies, procedural texts, so that's instructions. And that can be something like a recipe or a how-to book. And again, the land as text. Across into grade 5, nonfiction texts include persuasive writing and things such as editorials and opinions. And everyone is asking about grade 6. Nonfiction texts include speeches. So there are some speeches that we could look at. I've found that some of the good examples for nonfiction texts, for example, the leader of Medicare in Saskatchewan, I found his great speech from when he brought in Medicare. Those kinds of things can be used. People often use Martin Luther King Jr.'s speeches and those kinds of things to show kids, demonstrate examples of good speeches as well. So I also wanted to make sure that you're aware that when you go to the learning outcome, so I'm going to use, for example, the grade 5 learning outcome, there are 2 icons that come up on the learning outcome. This one, if you're using Google Classroom, this is how you connect with your Google Classroom. But the one I want to show you mostly today is this eye in a circle. So there's information to be shared with you related to that learning outcome. So under that learning outcome, here are all the cusps that come along with it. And here are resources that might be tied to it. And I've picked one that's blank. That's great. I'm going to go back and try the writing one. So also under the grade 5 curriculum, I want to go all the way to the writing. I'm going to do the 5-6 actually. Go down to the writing learning outcome. Come on here. Conventions. I went too far. Sorry. So if we go to writing in grade 5 and we look at the learning outcome, we should be able to click on that eye icon and let's see what writing resources might be connected. So empowering writers, grade 5 narrative writing guide, writing better, effective strategies for teaching students with learning difficulties, I bet, and teaching writing well. This is a suggested resource for grade 5 writing. Writing power, empowering writers. There are quite nonfiction writing power. There are a lot of suggested guides. Some sample lessons on audience awareness. So keep in mind that you can find resources on the website if you click on the learning outcome. I think the last thing that I want to show you is where nonfiction comes up under writing. I'm going to continue to do 5-6 because a lot of people were concerned about the writing in grade 6. So if we look at writing, underneath the learning outcome for writing in grade 6, there are 4 rows. The first row is all about the writing process. So all of the knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures are about the writing process. Then in the next row, it's all about creative thinking and creative writing, which mostly relates to narrative. If you go to the third row, it talks about research. Oh, I skipped that too quickly, sorry. So the research process is in the third one, and that includes writing to inform, explain, describe, or report. So this is the narrative writing piece in the curriculum. for grade 6. And as we talked about yesterday, we don't know what that PAT is going to look like yet. But this is the indication that we will be doing some writing to inform, explain, describe, or report. And then the last row under writing is about using different tools for writing. So this involves printing, keyboarding, and cursive handwriting. That students experiment with those different tools, and then in the end, choose one that suits their form of writing. Okay.
Tricia,
yeah.
there's a question about how do you get 2 grades on one slide? Or
Okay,
how do you get
so
2 grades at the same time?
Yep, that is the zoom in and zoom out. So I do it under view in my browser. You can zoom in and just get 1. You can zoom out and you can have as many as 3. You can look at 3 grades at a time. If you continue to zoom out, I could have 4, 5, 6 all on here. It just gets smaller and smaller. All right. Just a minute. With that descriptor, do you need to teach students the different forms of writing? Yes, you do need to teach different skills of writing in different ways. So nonfiction strategies and forms, and fiction strategies and forms. Okay. Oh, that is the single point. I wrote both of those single point rubrics. So if you have questions, feel free to email me with that too, the ones that are in the chat. Okay, I think that was all that I was going to share for now from the curriculum. I will go back to Irene's slides.
Thank you, Tricia.
You're welcome. And we're back to your mini lesson. For combined classes. I have not seen anything planned for combined classes other than with the Hutterite colony teachers. But that might be something that you want to request, definitely. Back to you, Irene.
All right. I'm going to move into the mini lesson component of this session. Are you screen sharing? Because I can't see it. That could be me. It's always me.
Nope, it's me. I'm sorry.
Good. It's not me.
I will share screen. I was reading the chat. I get.
Yeah.
Share screen. There we go.
So this mini lesson involves understanding what nonfiction is and how it's built. And as I said, I'm using this book, Conservation. It's a mini text. It's part of the Moving Up with Literacy Place, grades 4 to 6. If you have it in a closet in your school somewhere, I would certainly take it all and keep it in my room and use the books out of it because it's really wonderful. So this particular book has several different sections in it. Okay, so that's one thing, and that lends itself very well to look at nonfiction text in a, not with longer text, but shorter. So we certainly have Planets Under Threat, but this is the page that has all of the really interesting pictures and labels with it. So some of these titles are things like Planet Under Threat, Saving the Forests, Plant Your Own Forest, Protection in Parks, etc. And so as I use this with my students, the first thing I'm going to do is ask them everything that they know about nonfiction. And whatever they know or not know, we want to put everything on chart paper, we want to put everything on whiteboard, whatever, so kids can see their collective thinking about what nonfiction is. Pre-reading something like nonfiction, the basic question is, what do we already know about? That would be the beginning of that. Then once we have that discussion, we can ask, where do we read nonfiction in our own lives? And, you know, we saw things like recipes, menus, instruction manuals, those kinds of things. And that is another good share in terms of getting that pre-focus going for learning how a book is built. Now, you can take this book and you can ask kids to just flip through, like any book that's nonfiction, and just ask them to flip through the whole book, just like this. And then you can say, what do you think this is going to be about? What do you think you're going to learn about? And we can then go back to the first pre-reading question, is what do we know about conservation? So what this is like a classroom conversation with some note-taking on your part that gets the focus going around nonfiction and then the topic-specific conservation. What are all the things we know? And please feel free to contribute your own ideas to the class think. And it's good to have that visual, because you can say, look at all that we know as a class. And there needs to be that sense of community that says, this is, you know, we are a group, we can think together, we can share our ideas, and no idea is good or bad, so to speak. Now, I can do a book walk with one part of this book. So I'm going to go to Planet Under Threat, and I'm going to point out the colors. I'm going to point out that some of the titles are in pink. I'm going to point out the photographs. There's a think about it component. I'm going to point out all of the pieces that are just on pages 4 and 5 that are text features. And there's even this component that's just a preamble up there. Let's look at that component. But really, you can certainly do this. Now with a note taker, as a teacher, you can do on chart paper, you can do the kinds of things that are noticed on pages 4 and 5. I would even give students a copy of that chart paper so that they can take notes. I really, really think it's important that our students take notes, because it helps to consolidate that thinking. Handwriting and the brain have a connection that laptop and brain do not. And it's an important component. And it's amazing how, where I teach, there are so many 20-ish people, 20 somethings that don't write. They just, it's too hard, et cetera, et cetera. And a problem that I've heard about is that students can't read handwriting, which I never thought would be an issue. But anyway, that's beside the point. So I'm going to do pages 4 and 5 with a note taker, and I do it in, I would go titles, font, pink titles, pictures. Let's look at these pictures and look at the comment, the caption under the picture. What do you see in the picture that says that it connects to the world consumes 84 million barrels of oil every day? What can we see? Let's put that in our note taker. So a note taker is simply your creation as to, it's like a guided writing component that has the sections you're going to talk about, and students fill in the information. And you could be filling it in on a smart board or something like that, but it's really important, most especially in nonfiction, to do that note taker component. I would go to pages 6 and 7, Saving the Forests, and I would ask students to do a book walk in pages 6 and 7 with each other. So using the same note taker, you can have kids fill in together what they see. Saving the Forest has a lot of the same structure, different pictures. Students can have a look at these pieces. Their titles are in green. And there's a bolded word called conservationist. So students together now can look at pages 6 and 7 and do a book walk with each other, with a note taker. Then I might go and say, do pages 8 and 9, plant your own forest, on your own, filling out another note taker that says, what do you see here? And yes, an anchor chart would be amazing to say, what are some text features and structures in nonfiction? Absolutely. Now, the page 8 and 9, or the plant your own forest, I would say, do this on your own. And I'm going to collect the notes you take on pages 8 and 9 as an exit slip. And then I would formatively have a look and see if people are understanding what's going on. And that would be a very good way to formatively assess their knowledge so far. I have this book series is called Earth Rescue, but the Scholastic series is Moving Up, grades 4 to 6. And it's a brilliant resource, honestly, for, again, a wealth of these kinds of books. I'm giving you some templates for creating note takers in a minute. Certainly when you're modifying these lessons, you're going to create a note taker that's far less, that has less text in it. You're going to maybe be really specific and say, write down what you see in the pictures, or write down words that you don't know, write down what this page reminds you of. Those could be very much more specific to let strugglers, if you will, be successful. So the big question at the end of this on the slide is, which text features did you find most helpful to your understanding of the text, and why do you think so? So, you know, it's a big question, which could be something we could ask our students at the beginning of the next class, or, you know, at the beginning or at the end. But which text features did you find most helpful to your understanding of the text? What makes you think so? That's another exit slip. That could be this part of that important part. So this mini lesson, which would take more time than a single component, could be a whole week. That could be a 10 to 15 minute routine for that week. This week, we're going to spend the first 15 minutes learning about text structures in nonfiction. So you could break up this mini lesson into 3 or 4 days, doing a book walk with the kids. Next day, do it with the partner. Third day, do it on your own and answer the question. So those are some of the pieces that I want to share with you in terms of how do we specifically dig. And yes, you do need to teach specifically these components. We can't assume that students know what it is. We have to be specific. Direct instruction, guided practice, application. That's the sequence of teaching. So I put some questions in here for a book walk. You know, what's the main idea? Do you know anything about this topic? Name 3 important details. What did you learn? Was there something in here you already knew? And you don't have to do them all. Pick 1 or 2 pieces, not many, because I find that students start to make it about the choosing. Oh, I don't like that question anymore, I'm going to switch. So if we can limit the choices, that we keep them focused on what they're supposed to do. Are there any words that are unfamiliar to you? You know, those are some good ones. Another slide shows you a few more. Where can you find more information? If you could rename the title, what would it be? Have you read a book similar? It's that whole making personal connections, which obviously we can with nonfiction. What facts did you enjoy learning the most? Is there something you'd like to learn next? And did you like the text? Why or why not? Is again that reflective part of retell, relate, reflect. Did I like it? No, I didn't. But tell me why. It's great that you didn't like it, but tell me why. And it's not about judging that you should like it because I like it or it's good. But as long as you can support with evidence, that's what we're really after with our students. Are there any thoughts or questions or anything like that about this mini lesson? And we're using a before, during, and after sequence with it.
Maybe I'll just add as an answer to the question about explicitly teaching text features that I would do a mini lesson on captions one day and then do another mini lesson on headings and subheadings another day.
Yeah.
That those are the features that students need to understand and start to use to help themselves find information.
That's right. Absolutely.
Kristen has a question.
Hi. Yeah, so basically for combined class for like mini lessons, say I would find the skill that relates to both curriculums, and then the way I differentiate it is they would have a different activity. Does that make sense?
You could have the same activity if you want. If a grade 3 and a grade 4 both need to learn about captions, it doesn't hurt them to do the same activity.
That's right.
For grade 3 and 4, I wouldn't say are very different. You'll have a very low 3 and a very high 4, but they can do the same activity and take it to their own level.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And then the last question I had, thank you, ladies, is will we be getting, I think there are documents that exist on the website, the AARP, whatever that acronym is, for like where specifically grade 3 and 4 overlap or where they differentiate, or do I have to go comb through it myself?
I can show you some of those bridging documents and comparisons.
Right, that's what they're called. Okay, thank you. That was it.
Yeah. Okay.
Trisha, would it be okay to ask you to share that document with the group just to show them?
Yeah.
Or what's your take on that?
A little bit later, I'm going to show them our PDC website, and then they'll be able to see where they can find it themselves.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thanks. This whole notion of nonfiction, and you folks are lucky to be in grade 4 to 6 because it lends itself so beautifully to science, social studies, every other subject that you teach. So I would be using everything that I've talked about so far in my subject areas that I teach, because we know that literacy goes across the board. And so you have a great opportunity to have a science lesson, but teach the text features of that science book, or to have students do a chapter walkthrough and ask them 3 questions with the chapter walkthrough, and have the kids do that in pairs or small groups to discuss those text features and structures. So make sure you consider that whole cross-curricular component. Okay, so now this might also work well with hybrid text we explored on Tuesday. Yes, absolutely good. These are good ideas, and it's a great piece for for ELL students and strugglers. So that would be the mini lesson, and I would talk about routine right now. The routine is so critical to what we do in class. It gives our students a chance to hang on to something that they know is going to happen. It gives our students a chance to be successful in a short period of time and in small ways. And some of these routines are for you, the teacher, like model, explain, guided practice, application. That's a habit of mind for a teacher to adopt. And guided practice is where you get to be the coach. This is where formative assessment happens, where you can help people. And as I said before, when you conference with your students, guided practice says, this is what I'm looking for today from each of you. I want to see that you are understanding what captions mean. And I can spend a minute with each student asking about captions and their understanding. Gives you a lay of the land by asking the same question, gives you a chance to say that the students are struggling or not. And so guided practice should have a purpose to it as well. Even something like, I'd like you to tell me what you're going to write about, and listen to each student. They get a bit of feedback from you, but they all get to be, you get to speak to all of them, and then you get that lay of the land kind of notion. An application should be something students have not seen or done, but through modeling and explaining and guided practice, they're going to use the skills you taught them to apply to something like a performance task or a written response or something like that. The kind of process that we adopt is pre-reading. We have to get kids ready to read something. Yes, Pamela, I say that a guided practice with the whole class is a very good idea. Very good, absolutely. When we look at the reading process, we know we have to get our students ready. And questions, easy questions like, what are all the things we know about in a nonfiction way? Have you ever? What would happen if you? Those are 3 really good sentence starters to get kids thinking about where we're headed with, for instance, the conservation book. Pre-reading is that questioning. During reading is where I highly recommend that you give your students something to think about while they read. So it's really, during reading is about think and read at the same time. And this is where sticky notes might come in. While you read, you're going to have 2 stickies, and I want you to put a sticky right where you're reminded of something in your own life. Put the sticky on the print and write down what you're reminded of in your own life. And you've got 2 stickies, so do that in 2 places. After the fact, we will discuss it in small groups, we'll write about it, or we'll draw about it. And we've got to consider think and read at the same time. Many students, their eyes go over the print and they say, okay, I'm done, now what do I do? Like, life is a series of do things that the teacher wants you to do, and that's not what we're due. Post-reading is afterwards, and for me, this is about really learning all the different ways you can summarize text. And it can be the narrative pyramid. That applies actually in a social studies context, because there are true stories about heroic figures and so on. But it can be that 5-finger kind of summary. We have many different ways, but it's that thinking of summarizing that's really important. Summarizing says to me, you had a complete understanding of what you just read, or you didn't, or in between somewhere. And so I love the use of sticky notes. You want to keep the amount in check. I watched a grade 4 teacher do this, and the little girl, I had no idea, she just turned around all of a sudden and looked at me and had put the stickies right even on her eyelids and was like this. It was actually quite creepy when she did that, and look what I did. And I said, are you done? So let's just focus back. So you want to keep that control of the number of stickies people get. It keeps the thinking focused. Perhaps you can say something like, I want you to put a sticky where you already knew this and tell me where you learned it from. Do that in 3 places, but keep it focused, and keep the sticky notes, because we're going to do something with it after, which could be a write, draw, or tell kind of a choice. We always ask our students, how do you know? We always include note takers, whether you are presenting, whether we are watching a video, and even when we have accountable talk, we should still be taking notes. Those kinds of, I'm going to talk to you about note takers in a minute, but even a note taker, you could whip something up about, what's the topic, and what were comments made about the topic, and what do you think about the topic, and so on. just to give them that notion of organization of text and organization of my thinking. So I believe really in note taking. And again, as I said, like when you write down your notes, you are more focused on main idea and supporting details than when you use a laptop. So there are note taking pieces that you can adapt, that you can make your own. Absolutely, I would hope that you would. We've talked about sticky notes. Rereading is a very important component of instruction in language arts and anything. But we want to give our students a reason to reread. And so I might say, let's read this to get the gist of what's going on. Now I want you to go back to pages 4 and 5 and reread again to have a look at what details these pictures are showing you. You can reread one text all week long in the form of mini lessons to look for different pieces and focus. So rereading is huge, and strugglers often think that rereading is, that really good readers don't do that. Are you kidding me? Readers, I'm sure you all do, but I'm constantly rereading. Now I need to be aware of, why am I doing this again? Why am I off topic? But to deliberately and intentionally reread is hugely important. And so it's on you to create a reason to reread something. And I really wanted to share No Excuses with you for no good reason, but I think it's a really good component in terms of a habit of mind for yourself and your students. No Excuses I'll show you the handouts in a minute just to give you more clarity, but No Excuses is a list that you post in the classroom, and it's called No Excuses. And you only put 6 pieces on a No Excuses list, only 6 items. And they are only pieces that are very obvious to you, the teacher. So a No Excuses list would say, and I'm just throwing out examples, name, end punctuation, word walls are spelled correctly, the writing, I can read it, it's legible, but only keep it to 6 things that you can immediately identify, so that when a student hands something in, you can say, no, it's not ready for me yet. You haven't met all the criteria on the No Excuses list. And then we ask our students eventually to say, oh, geez, yeah, I didn't put my name on it. Okay, now I can hand it in. There's that accountability that's really important for our students to be, beholden to. It puts some of that back on the student, because you're looking at rubrics and checklists and all sorts of things. You're going after the deeper pieces. And I had a grade 9 teacher who said no small I's exist alone. And eventually she didn't have to do it anymore, because the kids really showed improvement. Not all of them, but a lot of them did. And it's a better way of trying to correct something like that than me circling all the small I's, which the message to the kids was, keep doing that, because she really likes to circle things. And that was not the message that I was intending. So again, this is something I want you to consider, a No Excuses list. You can add or take away as you go through the year, but keep it to 6 and keep it to things that you can see immediately. And you can build the list as time goes. Eventually, yeah, you could do a desk prompt of this for sure, but critically and importantly, choose things you can see immediately that don't require you to read all of these papers to look for that. Did you follow the No Excuses list? These are things that I know my students know. I know they brought this with them from their last grade. So like your name and so on, absolutely. And if I can't read it, bingo, I have to take it back, that kind of thing. So some really good ideas. Are you folks able to go into your handouts at this point? They were emailed to you today, I believe, Tricia.
Yes.
I just want to go over what I sent to you, which has everything to do with what I've just been talking about? Are you able to bring those up, Tricia, or? You're not, you're muted. Tricia, you're muted.
Where would you like to start? Which one would you like to?
Which one do we have first?
There are sticky notes, there's KLW chart, classroom no excuses, and student self-assessment prompts.
2, 3.
You tell
And
me.
is there student created study guides?
Nope.
Okay, that's one that I will make sure that gets
Done with
sent.
the recording? Okay.
Yeah. So sticky notes, I gave you a list of the kinds of things you can ask your students, and this is not a comprehensive list. This is just a starter. You can absolutely have students with as many sticky notes as they need to put a sticky on every fact that's in the nonfiction. And then we can share that as a group and have that chart paper sort of component, that anchor chart to do this with. I wouldn't put more than 6 on a no excuses list. The reason is that it becomes an unwieldy list and people stop looking at it. So you can exchange and do, but if it can become very unwieldy as this long list of things that we need to do. And we hope some things then become sort of ingrained in our students. I'm not saying, no, you can't. I'm just saying that I wouldn't do that. So sticky notes, there's a list. The KLW chart.
Yeah.
I would like you to have a look because it is not a KWL chart. It is a KLW chart and there's an R in there for read. And what my experience with KWL charts is such. First of all, I'd give them a 3-column page. And the first question is, do we have to fill it into the bottom? And which was so, vital to the lesson. But anyway, so what do you know about Australia? Well, there's your opportunity to say nothing. What do you want to know about Australia? Well, I don't know. I don't know anything about it. So I don't know what I want to learn. I don't know what I don't know. Then we would say read. And then I would say, so what questions do you have about Australia? And, that's not the way we want that to work. So a KWL chart should really be revised, in my opinion, into a knowledge. What do we already know about Australia, which is certainly a classroom practice, right? We can brainstorm it together, use your note taker. Then I want you to read the article about Australia, as you can see in the template. Now I'm going to say, what have you learned about Australia? Because you've had a chance to read a bit about it. And I might say 2 details, 2 pieces. Now students have ammunition with which to ask a good question. Now students can say, well, here's what we brainstormed. Here's what I read. Here's what I learned. Oh, and I have a question now. And that's more of the sequence of thinking, if you will, that's more helpful than just KWL. So KRLW, if you will, sounds like a radio station, but it's a more in-depth, more countable way to look at that KWL chart that we have used for a long time. The next component is no excuses, I think, Tricia. And the no excuses is it's an example. It's not exactly that way. You'll each have your own. You can have a no excuses math list if you wish to, or science or whatever, but it's that whole idea. The idea behind it is you kids are responsible for some things, as am I, but they're 2 different things. And then assessment sentence stems, that came up yesterday. So I just thought I would send you some sentence stems that kind of promote that thinking about the quality of your work. But remember, when students answer the sentence stem that you've given them, they need to speak to the criteria on the rubric, on the 1 point, on the any kind of assessment or learning goal that you're working on. They need to speak to, please notice on that. It can't just be, please notice that I tried my best or anything like that. It's got to be very, very specific. But I thought you could use those sentence stems for that self-assessment component that Tricia talked about yesterday. Are there any questions about anything? So I sent to Tricia from another place, the student created study guides. And there are 3 of them. One is a fact-based graphic organizer. I'm just saying that, Tricia, so that you can perhaps get that to Heather if you find it. And if you don't, I can resend it.
Okay, I will make sure that that goes out
Yeah.
with the recording.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that there are 3, they are graphic organizers. They are for issue-based analysis, fact-based article, and concept overview. They are icky and old, but I never ever expected you to just copy them and use them. When you see them, you can use the sections. These are note takers. You can use 2 of the sections on Monday and 1 on Tuesday and so on. You'll remake them so that students can have them at hand. They're asking students to do things like summarize, write down some facts, draw a picture. They're wonderful. I love them. And I really hope that when you do get them with the recording that you'll have a look at them and revise them to suit your needs across the grades and across the subjects. Because if we're reading an article with an issue in it, in social studies, I gave you a graphic organizer for that one. So I hope that meets your needs, if you will. Any questions about the handouts? Did I miss anything?
Yeah, they might not know because they don't have those note takers for sure.
Yeah, they'll have that with the recording, so that'll be fine.
Okay.
Okay, so if we the book walk questions, those are those 2 slides that were earlier on. Are you able to extrapolate those? And
Yeah, I could do that.
Thank you, Tricia.
You're welcome.
Can you do everything?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, I thought so. That's what I've heard about you. So
I just have to remember to do it. Yes, I can.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I'll send the book walk questions with the recording.
Yes, thank you. So our next slide will be student activities that can further the study of nonfiction. Students can absolutely make their own glossary of terms. I'm not seeing the slides.
Oh, I'm not sharing.
Oh, well, that's the whole reason.
I'm sorry, everyone. Having some technical difficulties today. It's not looking, my screen is not looking how I want it to look. Okay. Having trouble. It says I'm sharing. I'm gonna try it again. For some reason, I need to stop share and reshare. It says that I'm sharing. Share screen. Okay. Go back to that. Student activities.
Yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So a couple of activities, students could create a glossary of terms about nonfiction of their own. Hopefully you can share side-by-side books, which could be a book about conservation with a story about a boy who was involved in something or other. And they're called side by side because that's a very good way to share the difference between the two genres. The text scavenger hunt asks students to go through a text and find a caption about the brown cloud and explain in your own words what the brown cloud means. So they have to, you make them walk through the text to find specific things you're asking them to find. Note-taking strategies we've discussed. You could do a nonfiction summary template, which is simply beginning, middle, and end. Really, it's not about plot, etc. We talked about the KLW chart. What about a nonfiction novel study, a nonfiction book study, historical, a person, you know, things like that? Why can't we incorporate that perhaps with the novel study, but, you know, do the nonfiction component in another part of the year? That would be something to do. And, you know, subject specific magazines in class, like National Geo and Scientific American and Maclean's and Time and those things, to have a corner where you have subject specific magazines could be a place for students to go during silent reading, or if you have centers, but that would be available. And, you know, students could go through there and that's what they would have to read. Or I would have nonfiction books in a corner as well. You could even have a read nonfiction morning that says, we're looking at, you have to take a magazine and read an article out of it, and then you need to share. So those are some activities that you can have with your students that lend themselves well to this continued critical analysis of the nonfiction text that we read. Okay, so with assessment, I would give my students a nonfiction short piece of text, and I would ask them to do the following reader response to it. Reader response is in a form of writing, and it's a very important way to see how well a student is comprehending text. So I would say, what is this text about? I'm marking summarizing. What does this text remind you of? Use evidence from the text to support your answer. And do you think this text is important for others to read? Use evidence from the text to support your answer. And I would use a marking guide, a marking checklist, or a rubric to assess something like this. If you wanted to, it could certainly be formative. That's up to you which one you'd like it to be. But these are the 3 R's, if you will. R is retell, summary. The other R is relate, which is what does this remind you of? And the third R is reflect, which is to offer an opinion about what you're doing there. So that's how I would assess. And next slide has me looking at skills and procedures. And I looked under skills and procedures, and these are the 2 criteria that I would use to assess that retell, relate, reflect component from the previous slide. So how well does the student know that structure of text can support the organization and communication of ideas? Respond to text by summarizing main ideas and providing supporting evidence from self, other texts, or the world. That one alone serves itself very well on a 1-point rubric. Big time. So I'm going to ask, before we wrap up, I'm going to ask Tricia to show us some things on ARPDC.
Okay, we had lots of questions about where to find things. So if you remember from yesterday, I did show you the arpdc.av.ca website. If we look under English language arts, there is the curriculum comparison that people were asking about. It's here. Curriculum comparison documents K-6. So on this website, I'll do the 6, for example. We went through it. I didn't do the 6 one, I did the 3 one, but we went through them and we highlighted everything that was new in this curriculum compared to the one that we were using last year and for the 20 years before. So you'll see there's a lot that's new, a lot that is changed. When there's nothing there, it means that this was in the old curriculum and it's no longer in the new curriculum. So that's why there's a blank space beside it. There is a video that goes with it that explains how we created the document so that you understand why some things are highlighted and other things are not. I really strongly recommend that you go through the new Learn Alberta website and you read each curriculum for your own grade so that you're not just going by what we're telling you is in the curriculum, but make sure you are really familiar with your curriculum before you start teaching. Also on the ARPDC, so on the About Us, people are asking how you book sessions. Under About Us, it explains that the consortium is a combination of all these regional consortia. So Irene belongs to ERLC, which is the Edmonton region. I belong to SAPDC, which is Southern Alberta. But these are the directors for all of those. And if there's a particular piece of learning that you need to have, or that you know a group of people need to have, please contact the director that's in your region, and that person will definitely connect you with someone that can do the session, or they'll build a session. And if there isn't someone available in that district, they will find someone from another district and make sure that the learning is still happening for all teachers. So that's another good way to use this website. The learning opportunities that are coming up are for the entire province are always on this website. Some of the ones that are currently going on, and maybe mine's, you can set them to different focus areas. You can set them to different regions. Mostly what we are doing is recording the sessions or having them available online so that you can attend sessions in any region. So I think that was all the ones that I wanted to show you, but make sure you have a look. I think someone was sharing in the chat the 1-point rubric. So this is a document that I made explaining how we make 1-point rubrics. And then there were some samples in there as well. Okay, oop, now I'm into financial literacy and I didn't mean to do that. So new curriculum resources, and I'm trying to stick to the English language arts. One thing we didn't talk very much about was the oral language, but on this website, there are many oral language resources as well, and they are created for kindergarten to grade 6. So when you go into view the resource, there are lots of activities here and explaining how you would teach the different skills, but from kindergarten to grade 6. For example, in a show and tell, how you would do that with kindergarten and how you would change it progressively to make it more, have higher expectations for grade 6. I think that's answering the questions I wanted to answer. Irene, was that everything you wanted me to show from there?
I thank you so much. Absolutely.
Awesome.
And so I would like to ask you a question, and I hope that you can respond unmuted or in the chat room. What does the integration and teaching of nonfiction look like in your classroom, or what will it look like? In other words, what kinds of pieces can you take from today that you might consider infusing into the work that you do?
I forgot that I also brought 2 books to share.
Yeah,
I'll stop for a minute while people are putting that into the chat. I wanted to bring people's attention to a series called Little People, Big Dreams. There are many in this series, but the one that I purchased is the Terry Fox one. So I would use this both as a mentor text and as a piece of information. So it's a piece of nonfiction. I'm going to read you just the opening paragraph so that you can see how you can use it as a mentor text. It says, little Terry lived in the Canadian city of Port Coquitlam with his parents and 3 siblings. He was a determined boy who loved all kinds of sports and would never miss a day of school, not even when he was sick. So that is a mentor text, a opening paragraph that you could use for any piece of nonfiction writing or biographical writing or autobiographical writing as well. But use that form to write about yourself or to write about another student or a famous person. Anyway, it's the Little People, Big Dreams series, and I found them quite helpful. All right, are we getting some pieces in the chat?
increase the use of nonfiction text in social and science, have specific goals when asking students to reread text, and multi-genre thematic text. And the question is, what do you mean by mentor texts again?
Okay, so a mentor text is a piece of writing that is a sample of how a real author writes that you could use as a format to model student writing. So as I said, with that opening paragraph, here's a model of what a real author wrote. Let's use that kind of format, but substitute our own ideas. And sometimes students need to see a model before they can do their own piece of writing. If we tell them to write a descriptive paragraph, they need to see what a descriptive paragraph looks like, an excellent or proficient descriptive paragraph looks like, before they can make that their own. Does that make sense? Is there anything you want to add to that about mentor texts?
I think it becomes another teacher habit of mind. If you're going to show, if you want your kids to write something, they need to see an example of it in terms of published work that says this page alone is so full of good description. Let's have a look through it. So mentor text needs to be part of your own routine as a teacher. So whenever you're in this, it's kind of the same as what I said about recipes, you know, and got to show you what it looks like.
I'm going to share the screen because I have our I am going to put up, I'll share our emails.
Before we all leave, if anyone teaching grade 4 is interested in joining maybe a Facebook group to share questions, ideas, and new resources, then send me an email. This is from Nosheen, and she has put her email on in the chat room. Sticky notes, think, read, KLW. I'm a big fan of annotating texts. Also, I like the idea of using a nonfiction text, such as a poem, that presents facts and asks students to use it as a knowledge bank. Absolutely. For example, view of a pig, to write or draw a definition of a pig. Lovely.
Okay, I'm going to stop recording. Thanks to everyone for joining us for these 4 days.